Michael, this conversation is near and dear to my heart. Acceldata was my first investment as an institutional investor, and I still remember when the CEO Rohit said that they had coined a name for a new category that they were building called data observability. And I thought that's nuts because no chief data officer in their right mind would be able to find the budget for a new category like that back in 2018. Anyway, turns out I was wrong because they are crushing it. And today we have the good fortune to be able to interview Ashwin Rajeeva, who is the founder and chief technology officer of Acceldata. And it's so inspiring and humbling to hear the stories when Ashwin takes us behind the scenes of Acceldata.
Ashwin's conversation was a treat for me too, because he has managed so many engineers, he's grown a huge enterprise team, and he's so thoughtful about process and structure and AI. This is just a wealth of knowledge, so I'm happy we got a chance to talk to him.
Yeah, it's amazing. Let's jump right in.
Hi, Ashwin. Start very simple. When's the first time you ever said Acceldata? Like, how did you land on the name and you guys were like, okay, this is a company, we're doing it?
Firstly, thanks Vidya, and thanks Michael for having me. I'm really happy to speak to you guys, and especially to Vidya after so long. I think the Acceldata story is interesting because at the time when we all came together, so it was 4 of us on the founding team, and all of them are from a CEO was running this team in a company called Hortonworks, which was one of the premier sponsors of this whole Hadoop data lake project. And most of our job was, talking to customers and figuring out what went wrong in their deployments. So Hortonworks at the time, even now, big organization, Fortune 100 companies who essentially invest a lot in big data. Big data then. And one of the bigger issues was when something went wrong, the standard procedure was again, collect logs, send the logs over the internet to somebody's office, and then a bunch of people look at it. Things usually could not be resolved by just using things like New Relic, Datadog, general time series metrics. So we thought we could do a better job, and we thought of this thing called observability, but in the context of data systems. And so Acceldata is kind of a combination of accelerate and data in some sense, which is what it means. We come up with definitions over the years, but this is the one which I remember. So our plan at that time was that we'd make probably the best observability system for this stack, this big data stack. And hopefully in 1 or 2 years, because the growth of big data and Hadoop in our ecosystem was kind of, on an exponential curve at that point. This is 2015, 2016. We thought that this is going to be really a big thing, which is almost a parallel infrastructure to standard, Datadog, New Relic. But somehow in 2018, 2019, we realized that cloud players like Snowflake, Databricks, they're kind of on the up, and the skill sets required to manage this beast of an open source ecosystem were kind of on the down. And so at that time, we thought maybe we should expand beyond data observability years. I think Acceldata as a company has moved quite a lot ahead of where we started from a data observability perspective. And now we are, in some sense, very broad based. We have 5 products, all of which have some sort of adoption with Fortune 500 companies. These 5 products, Acceldata is now enterprise data technology company, moving towards being an enterprise data platforms company in the next couple of years. That's where the whole journey began.
That's awesome. There's so much to dig in there, and years and millions of hours of work probably. Listeners, I think, are going to be the most curious about those first 12 months and even less than that. Something jumped out at me when Vidya first told me about your team. Like you just said, you're all technical. We don't see that all the time. Like it's typically, a sort of a sales-driven individual and a tech-driven individual that meet and form a business. How did you guys decide, like, who does what? Who's going to be the CEO? How did you have that conversation?
A lot of it was driven by Rohit, who's our current CEO, right? He had the initial thought behind this is a problem because this is what he was dealing with as the owner of that platform. Socialized it with us. There were a bunch of other people in the beginning as well, so it was like a largish group. But somehow, the process of starting a company in its early days is a large shift in mindset and lifestyle and all those things. So at the end, there were only 4 left. And I think it was very natural for Rohit to take the CEO role because I think he has that mindset. So if you're not met Rohit, because Vidya has met Rohit, he's very, in a sense. And so it was very clear that he's going to be the CEO of the company, and rest of us, we've been doing that. I've been doing this since 2005. I know both of my co-founders for like 10 plus years. And so it was very natural that, hey, we're going to build a product he's going to go and sell the product and raise capital and do all the CEO things. I don't think we ever discussed it. It was just natural that this is how it's going to go.
That's awesome. And were you guys, you were all already successful at the time, at least to a degree. You had established professions.
Yeah.
You're not like just college kids kind of wrapping around with an idea. You have very successful corporate careers. What gave you this, and I'm sure you've had a bunch of ideas, what gave you this, like you said, this natural instinct that this is worth really making a switch for?
That's a great question. The last kind of full-time job that I had was in 2011. And then I was the first employee at this very early company in Bangalore. It's like very early, like 4 people in a house kind of a thing. And what ended up happening is that slowly you realize that people you start working with, they're not the same in the sense the way they talk to you or they work with you and how they behave professionally. So there is this thought that the best friends might not be best co-founders and business partners. And I think when we were at Hortonworks with Rohit and Raghu, Gaurav, these are folks that realized that you could build a company with them because they have that combination of great integrity. It's something intuitive. I think you feel it, and when it fits, it clicks. We've been working together at Hortonworks for a few years before. Respect, Raghu is a great, programmer. Same with Gaurav. I think they like me as well. We all had this unit where we were largely working together, thinking about things together. Might not be, friends from 20 years, right? But I think this group I felt that we had the good combination that you could probably see yourself working with this group for 10 years. And without getting into the drama which sometimes happens between founding teams. So I think that was a big motivating factor for all of us to just get started and see where it goes.
This is so interesting. And just from the perspective of an investor, right, the drama that you talked about, it happens way too often than it gets talked about. And it's also interesting how you decided that this is the team that I want to build a company with, and that naturally directed you towards building Acceldata as opposed to, some other product or some other sector where maybe some of you have interest/experience and others don't.
I also think there's, some aspect of, I've seen also some of my friends in companies have some conflicts, but I feel that at some point they feel that whatever their point of view is, you may call it, is more important to them than that relationship between co-founders. Because we started in data observability, we've tried like many things. For some companies, for some startups, you have an idea, it's the right place, the right time, it clicks. For most others, they have to find their way. When you are going through this, there will be a lot of conflict, and it's not like we've not had conflict and arguments and things like that. But we feel, and I hope everybody feels the same way, that this relationship is more important than the day-to-day. It cannot be beyond that. And so if everybody believes in that, then you could probably find some common ground and move forward. And then, you have to have some trust, saying, Rohit will do the right job. He has to trust me that I'll build whatever he wants me to build and sell. So that also goes a long way. But I think having that sense that nothing is more valuable than this relationship, which you have invested 10 years now, 12 years, and hopefully it will go on for the rest of your life, then the small daily battles are not that relevant.
Between you and a bunch of guys know each other well, you're all competent, you can have direct conversations, you can comfortably navigate. So you know that, you decided to start the company before you really run into conflict situations. If my research is correct, you guys went from this idea to paying enterprise customers in a matter of months, which is very rare. How did that happen?
One of the great advantages we had, especially when we entered this whole data thing, if you look at the startup industry in large, data is like on one side. There's a bunch of companies, their customers, their influence circles are a little bit away from common tech landscape. And so we were there for 4 or 5 years at the forefront of it. So we knew who are the customers, who have pain, whom can we reach out to. Of course, we had our relationships which we had built over the years. So building the first version of the product in 2018, at the end of 2000, was not so hard because we knew most of what needs to be built, right? So it was a matter of 3 people sitting together and building it. We started in October, and we were done with the MVP in December
Of the same year.
of the
That's
same
crazy,
year.
right?
Yeah.
I know, yeah, for an
And-
enterprise product in the big data space.
No, but everything starts small,
Yeah.
right? I always felt that most customers would be willing to live with incomplete software if it solved a problem. And if there is no problem, then comes the demand for build more and more and more editions so that you can find some value in some corner. But the key driver is always pain. It's somebody who needs something now because there's something at stake, right? Things are not working. You invested a lot of money. You invested 4 million, 5 million into a platform. That's 300K more.
Right.
Just to make sure that things work properly. For Pulse, which is the first product, which is now adopted in Bank of America, Fargo, and a lot of our customers, only the top 3 mobile telecom companies in the all of them are Pulse customers. So for them, I think there is a very acute, easily demonstrable pain, and the software just talks.
That's really fascinating to me, and it rarely happens so smoothly. How exactly or specifically did that unfold? Did you guys talk to a bunch of customers, write it down essentially as a spec of what needed to happen, built it, and then went out, sent out the purchase order and got the order? Did you custom build it first for a particular customer? What was the sequence of events from you were doing it to your first dollar in the bank from the customer?
So what we did at that time is the problem was quite kind of constrained because there's a target platform and it's made by one of 2 companies essentially.
Which is
Cloudera Hortonworks.
oh, okay.
Those were the primary ones, and the platform itself was open source. So this is a very interesting story. So we built the first version of the product, and you need to test it against a bunch of clusters, right? And you need to validate whether it works on this OS, that distribution combination, this version of Java platform versus that. And so we wanted to get some of these open source platform licenses, but we didn't have any, and we didn't have the money to get any. Right. And nobody would take us seriously. So what we did is we said, okay, why don't we build our own? And so we took this whole open source stack, which is the whole of the Hadoop ecosystem, plus things like ClickHouse and stuff that we needed. And we combined all of it into a distribution we called Open Data Platform, ODP, which itself became another product, a line of business that we run. It's open source, it's available on our GitHub. And it's a complete replacement for any proprietary data platform that you have. It is up to date with all upstream libraries that you use, plus it has another 15 components which the vendors don't. So I feel the reason for the last 6 years, and most of our team has been here less than 2 years because we've added a lot of people. So the rest of it, we've built 5 products with about 60 people. And with now AI coming, AI assisted coding especially, I think we can do much more. So in some sense, I always say that we are probably one of the few teams that can ship enterprise software at that speed and scale. Because most of our initial folk at the core of the engineering team comes from that background where they've worked in the initial stages of this whole data processing, data management, open source movement.
Would it be fair to say that you basically gave your customers an unlock path from their existing vendors in order to make it easier to work with you?
In order to make it easier, and we don't charge anything for it. So the way it works is that customers come in and then they say, hey, we have this problem, show observability software. And then, they look at me and they say, hey, what is this? This seems like something which is on the website and this is probably an offer. It's like, it's a drop-in replacement. Just drop it. And the best part is that if you drop in and replace your existing data platform, then Pulse gets better because it has specific plugins which then start automating most of your management stuff. So there are, intricacies of anything. For example, small files. Some service goes down, it needs to be restarted. Some cluster needs to be updated. So a lot of that stuff we have automated, and it works best with our platform. And so the DNA of the company has always been just keep building, keep building. I think Rohit is also relentless that every time we have a CKO or a company event, we always launch something new.
What's a CKO?
A company kickoff.
Okay.
Right, yeah. So we always have something new baking on the engineering side. Because in the end, we would want to have a large market, large TAM, multi-product enterprise company. It was much harder when we were 4 people, and then 10, then 20. But now we think at the stage and scale that we are at, we have a real chance to actually make that happen.
And how many approximate engineers are there?
We are in the engineering group now 120 people, largely based out of India, some in Canada, and we are now strapping a team here in the Bay Area.
Super cool. Maybe this is a great jump off into team dynamics. And then it was the four of you guys. Did Rohit write code as well, or
Long back. Basically build the whole thing.
I like specifics. I'm always curious who was the first person, who was the first non-founding developer that you hired, and why did you hire them? How did you select them?
So first, there were a couple of people we hired at the same time. I would say one of the hires that we made just outside the founding team was who's now field CTO. His name is Chandra. He works out of Canada, and he came in with expertise on the implementations. So he is even now works with some of our biggest customers, basically advising them on what their strategy should be. Whether it's a data strategy, how do you bring data, how do you move data, how do you design a data system. He's also the key architect of this ODP thing, because he kind of said, okay, instead of figuring out how to get licenses and this, we can create our own. I know what needs to be pulled in, how it works, because he was also at Hortonworks and before that. So he's one of the key hires we made, and it's worked out incredibly well for us, because you can't just be 3 or 4 programmers. Whatever domain you want to work on, that's what you said, right? Usually there's a salesperson or somebody who knows that field well. Even on the tech side, even if you're building a platform, I think you need people who understand how customers are going to use it and what is their priority. And customers really like it when you just don't act as a vendor, especially on enterprise software. You also, they want you to be some sort of a strategic partner, because they want to make an investment for 3 years, 5 years. Nobody's buying software for like 6 months. And they would like a partner who's not so much all tech code, but speaks their language. So that was a key hire we made. We also got some really young professionals at that time, because you couldn't hire really senior people. And so we got some people who just came out of college and knew a little bit around Linux, Unix, and we worked with them. And most of them have stayed, at least on the engineering side. Initial 50 people who came are still around, most of them.
Is that important to you as CTO to develop these folks and have really long-term pathways in your company?
It is. I feel that as the team grows, there's some amount of, I don't find culture to be a great word for it,
right,
but there is the way of being and operating in this company. Right? So how the founders talk to each other, how's the vibe? Yeah, exactly, you're right. It's like a vibe. And so you would want the larger team to also in some way have the same attitude towards work. And it's important that people stay, because in the early days, you don't want to have so much churn in the technical team, right? Because there's a lot of context. People end up doing many things. So the same people who are writing the code are also deploying it or building deployment descriptors they have the credentials for AWS and things like that. And if that team keeps churning, then it's such a big headache without the right structure to absorb, train, tell them how this whole thing works, and then get them. So that can work when you have more people, when you're more structured, but it's harder to do it when you are small.
How do things start to go wrong? So not catastrophically wrong necessarily, but as you're bringing people in, there's the engineer that is super opinionated, and they just care about like a certain technical thing they want to get done their way. And then you have 2 people that for whatever reason just don't get along, and like all these little things that now you're really, and I guess we're shifting phase into now you're not just a developer who knew the product and the customer, now you're really building a team.
Yeah. I think it will happen to everyone, irrespective of the size. Even if you're like a 10 people team, you can have these sort of issues, or you can have it when you're 100 or 1,000. I think it helps to have managed some teams before, have some experience with managing people and their ambitions and their conflicts and things. I've always found over the years that there are 2 things which get conflated. One is the need for process. It's kind of a dirty word, because then this whole idea of, hey, you gotta be lean, mean, fast startup doesn't mean you should have any doc. That's one extreme. And then the other one is that, hey, we are so lean fast that we just do things on the fly. That's another extreme. And there are instances where both of these formulas might work. It might happen that a company can be super successful doing this or this, but most likely it won't be. So a good middle path, I think, is to emphasize early on the need for some structure in the way you work. And that can be as lean as you want, but you have to have some structure in the way that people operate, in the way that code is built, in the way that code is tested, in the way code is delivered. And there has to be that discipline that you bring early on so that when new people come in, it's more of a formula, right? So a new engineer comes in and they are not, racking their brains saying, this guys, they don't know how to, build stuff. They don't have a proper CI. They don't have good delivery. So let me go and, put my opinion and do it. So for most people who will come in, you should have at least some sort of a structure, which just helps not just in the delivery of software. I think that's one, but especially when you talk to enterprises, you will sign contracts. And at some point, somebody will ask you to do a certification. And at that time, you can't retrospectively go and put,
Right.
where is your build, where is your tracking, and who signed off, and all of that. So it really helps to create structure early, even in small teams. And that can evolve. So, and then have those sort of metrics that then start working once you have 15, 20 people, saying, okay, if there are problems with delivery, how many lines of code, it's not so relevant, but what's the coverage of it? How well is the test doing? Do you have a simple thing is most software these days, I find that it's hard for people to build it on their laptop and they need all this microservice nonsense to go build something here and deploy this and deploy this. It really slows you down. Ideally, you should be able to build, test everything locally, and then you should have a simply built mechanism to deliver, test, and then upgrade. So building that structure early on in any team is super useful for them to then follow this path which was set for you, then have some constructive, improvement on that over 3 months of brainstorming, socializing.
I have a follow-up question to that. I love, first of all, how you delineated between process and structure, right? One being sounding very rigid, as this is giving more of a framework to operate within. Now, given that Acceldata has been so prolific in terms of building new products and launching new products, I mean, you take pride in the culture that you have been able to foster here, where you're producing new products all the time, especially in this day and age, Ashwin, when you can wipe code a prototype so quickly. How do you, within the company, within this team of 120 engineers, how do you ensure that while people have the freedom to come up with ideas, how are you also trying to filter those down and making sure that, you don't have 120 ideas or 300 ideas?
Like I said, we have 5 products which are live. There are 10 of them internally. To your question, Vidya, I think one of the things is that innovation from a product perspective has to come in the domain which the company has chosen to operate. And so that narrows that field down anyways. It's interesting because I feel that you could probably ideate with ChatGPT and then come up with a concept, and then you can probably create a product spread out of that concept using Claude or something, and then that can convert into stories for developers, and those stories can be also wide built, and then they can be vibe coded. But at the end of it, a human, somebody, some VP or some data engineer has to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right. And so building software is not just about the coding part of it, right? But there's like the selling of it and the socializing of it, value demonstration is probably 60% of it. And with all this vibe coding, AI assistant coding, I would say that, the supply of software will far outstrip its demand. And so the people who will end up winning are the people who can integrate the best, who can really solve a pain point the customer has, and who can really deliver something of value. So value demonstration is becoming more and more important. And then it kind of narrows down where even if you have to have ideas in this domain, and then you have to build something which is then goes through this whole GTM mechanism saying, okay, can we brand it, can we sell it, can we tell a story?
Will anyone pay for it?
And then why will anybody pay for it? Because even they realize that if it's something simple which can be easily achieved, teams can wipe it. Right? It's not just that we can wipe for something.
It's been now 6+ years since you started the company. Talk a little bit about your lens as to how you were hiring engineers back in the day. And then given how easy it's become to code and how you're also indexing more on the ability to articulate a pain point and sell the idea, how has your lens towards how you hire engineers changed these days, especially the most senior types?
It's a great question. I think Michael would agree here. Right? Programming, for those of us who've been doing for a while, has actually come a long way even before vibe coding came. This is probably the final expression of all coding tools coming together. But from a time where you really had to struggle to put software together, to the IDEs getting better, the languages getting better, the frameworks getting better, to deployments and Docker and Kubernetes and all of it, it's been sort of an evolution that every 5 years or something, you could produce software at a much faster scale, could deploy it faster, can get infrastructure faster, and get feedback faster on what is deployed. And that's continued. And then now it's just gone on an exponential growth. But what doesn't change, I feel, is that given a business problem, if somebody has a problem, then you talk to 4 customers, 5 customers, you need to now go and tell the AI what to build. So the problem of imagining the solution and the right way to generalize problems across an industry or a bunch of customers and distill it down to, let's say, what we call as requirements for it to be then vibe coded is probably the skill that you need. And I find that a lot of it comes from experience. People who have done it a few times in whatever industry, they would be probably the best people to hire. So we still would like for people who have experience with data, have worked with it, have worked in companies or with data platforms who, been doing this for a while. And now you have this superpower where you can express yourself much faster, build much faster, deploy much faster, get things done. But the problem of fitment and imagination is still the same. And in some sense, I feel that, why, at the end of it right now, there was a graph, I don't know if you saw it, but with some fund or maybe an industry graph, it said, where are agents deployed? Have you seen that? And 50% is agentic coding. And the next one is like 7%, which is in some domain. And in some sense, that's because software has a pattern. It's repeatable. So there were books around design patterns, how to build software, how to build it. A lot of us basically followed it. And a lot of software, if you're used to it, those similar patterns, right? The way you write, let's say, plugins, or the way you write, factory, the way you construct, dependence modules and such. And that's why there's so much software that, it has got trained on and it can actually eject software in a certain format, which is in compliance to what was done before. It's not some new architecture that it spits out. It actually spits out patterns which has learned over the years. And it's the same. The best way to use this are people who kind of understand how all of it fits together. So if you had an architect or a senior software engineer or a staff engineer who would need maybe 5 or 6 engineers and to basically tell them, hey, break it down this way, this is the pattern, this is what you should do, this is how it all. Now you have AI, which basically does the same pattern kind of code. When you vibe code it follows the same pattern. And you can actually see it between well-written code, maybe from 5 years back on GitHub, and same language, same framework, same kind of domain, you would see that the vibe coded software is very similar, right? It follows the same set of patterns. So it's building on this institutional knowledge over the years.
Institutional knowledge in this case.
And the people who could probably best use AI to produce valuable software are people who have that knowledge, right? Not people who never build software. They could probably code something, but might not be as useful to anybody else. That's where I feel the best vibe coders would be the best software engineers.
So sounds like domain expertise still extremely important. Also equally, if not more important, is to understand and tease out what are the problems that customers actually have, and how, and also to have the judgment as to how generalizable that is. And thirdly, layer on your imagination, product intuition to what kind of a solution would actually make sense. So these are some of the things that you're looking for when you hire senior people.
The fastest companies with AI, vibe coded companies, are the ones who are building like small internal apps and websites.
Yeah.
Because that's what is the biggest use case, right? 100%. That you build small internal website, external websites. And the companies which came before, like, drag and drop software, Webflow, they also, went through the same adoption curve. But I feel this is like in 10 months because that's the software that you need to create.
Junior people, what's the entry point to your team right now?
It's hard. It's difficult because, we don't need the same growth in number of people to deliver the same volume. And for junior people, it's really hard because a lot of it was the fact that you could come out of university and then get trained on the job and then get something done. And most of those starter jobs are being eaten by. There's no good answer to it. I feel that you have to be a little deliberate with the other aspects of it. And so Raghu always tells me that, hey, when we have this debate, he says that everything else is okay, but it's always good, fun to work in like a team of say 10 people, where it's not just coding all the time. It's also the conversations that you have, the relationships that you build. Any team that even you would build, you would look for a good mix of people, right? Some people who are senior, some people are junior, so that there's a dynamic, there's some sort of mentorship, there's a relationship. So I feel that if you're building a team, then I think it would be hard to gauge people just on, can you do this lead code problem and therefore you're in or out. I think it would be a little bit more saying that I want such a team, and in that team, I want this mix. And therefore, I would like to have some fresh people with new ideas come in, learn on the job. Maybe they don't write a single line of code, they just wipe it. But if everybody's doing the same thing, then how does it work?
Do you get a lot of people, and I'm curious if you're seeing this now, that they're like, well, why should we buy your product if we can have a couple whippersnappers in our team vibe code or generate something like that? Whether the build or buy equation changes on their side.
Yeah.
Are you feeling pressure from that? Do you have to defend that?
Yeah, we do. There are teams in even like big global banks who are now thinking they can build things on their own. The only problem here is that the fate of all internal software is, I think, becoming irrelevant after 2 years, because you build this in about 3 months with all enthusiasm, and then it was built and delivered, and then you lost interest, and then you moved on, and now there's no one, and a bunch of people are still supporting it. This happens more often than not, right? There's a lot of companies that build a lot of internal software. Unless you have, it's critical to your business, and unless you have, updates and keeping up with technology and supporting it and fixing the vulnerability and security of it, that requires dedication more than 3 months. And that's why a lot of, companies, the ones they want to build internally, are not necessarily things which are too strategic to them. They're still looking for vendors to do it because they can, have a neck, they can choke and make sure that they deliver up to date as part of their critical business. So the build versus buy things comes in, I think it will come in more and more in for point solutions on SaaS software. And I think the market's also seeing it. If you have like a simple CRUD app that you build for some sort of a single use case, then you're in trouble, because somebody who is some agency can just go and say, I can do a better job. You can actually point the AI at that screen, take a few screenshots, say, I want this, and you can get it. But what we do as a company, that we are in the business of delivering platforms in key investment areas of the Fortune 500. That is the investment over 3 years, 5 years. We have many customers who have paid us for the next 3 years, and that they know that even if somebody can write code it, it's probably not in their best interest to do that, because it's like 3 or 5 year journey rather than something which can be done in a few months.
Ashwin, so when you started the company, you mentioned there were two key platforms. The world has Cloudera and Hortonworks. Of course, neither of those companies exist in their original shape and form anymore. But also we have not just Snowflake and Databricks, but also there was this wave of consolidation that customers started doing within their data infrastructure. We went from the modern data stack to too many modern data stacks to consolidation. And now there's open data format. And of course, vector databases have come up in the last 4 or 5 years. Unstructured data and how to use lock that price, that's become a big thing. So with all this happening, how do you see the 3 to 5 year journey for enterprises as far as data platforms go?
That's a great question. I feel that, the whole cloud transformation story, incredibly successful, but it's taken a long period of time. And now, by the time that kind of was finished for some big customers, now you have this whole AI. So there are a couple of aspects of it, and I can also put it in context on some of the work that we are doing. One thing we announced last year was this thing called ADM, you know that,
Yes.
which is about Agentic data management. And the whole idea was that there is this sort of software that we build is enterprise business software, and enterprise business software is usually a lot of process encoded into a few screens. Like you set up a policy, figure out what is the security, who is responsible for what, that sort of thing. And we realized that with AI, now instead of a person sitting and doing it, you could have an AI with similar capabilities who could actually automate a lot of these things. One of the things we realized that it's not so much about agents. So we spoke to really big customers of ours, banks and card processing companies, and they all are investing into agents. And the biggest question is that hey, you bought some framework to build agents, and you got some credits and things like that. But what would an agent do in the business context, not from a programming perspective? That coding agent, yes, great adoption, great use case. But let's say you have a business process. What would you do when you deploy an agent? So let's assume that there is an agent which wakes up at a certain point in time, looks at a bunch of data, then using its brains figures out what is most important for the CIO to see, right? And presents a dashboard. It's not the same every day. It's not a standard dashboard, a CIO dashboard, but it's something which is reacting on the latest set of data that the company has. And so 1 month it says the most important problem is adoption. The next month it says, hey, your bug count has increased because you're shipping it. It's a dynamic dashboard. It's a good AI agent to imagine. Let's just think about for this agent to actually give this dashboard to your CIO. It actually needs access to data, real data. And real enterprise data is never sitting in a nice place waiting for you to get you up. It's in 5 different places. If it's coming from some sort of a data lake, it's probably in Snowflake, some of it is sitting, somewhere else, some of it is in files, some of it is in point of sale systems or whatever. And so now if you imagine a real valuable AI agent really doing some real business work in enterprise, it needs access to business data. And it needs access in the same auditable, secure, who has access to what sort of time. And maybe it needs to crunch 10 million rows to actually get the report out. So I feel that with this whole AI wave, the need for AI to have access to enterprise data to make any useful agentic decision is going to be the key driver for everything. And you can see this in all the major platforms, whether it's Databricks, Snowflake, us, even the old one, trying to do this, hey, AI agents need data, and therefore we are the context provider for data thing, which is this trend. And so the need for agents to access data to make decisions would result in agents which have use beyond customer service, auto replying to emails and such simple cases. But if you really want to improve your business, you want an AI agent to go figure out which users are more eligible for payday loans, some example. Then it needs that the AI brain needs access to all this information. Who is going to give it to them? And that's where the modern data platform comes in. It's not so much about creating dashboards, but creating context, whether structured, unstructured, providing these billion brains in a data center, which I heard recently, the real meat to give some insight, which probably is useful to the business, than to be just a cool project you can try. I hope that makes sense.
Yes. So this is so fascinating for me. We've been in the, you and I in particular have been in the data industry for so long. And I remember when this trend around data democratization became a thing over a decade ago. This is when a whole slew of data catalogs started getting adopted in big enterprises. And then, of course, the likes of Acceldata really helping make sure that big data systems were reliable, and hence we required observability. To now, the vision that you painted, where whether it be the CEO or CIO, in order for them to know what is the most pressing problem that requires their attention, you really have to be able to get all that, the right kind of data, the right set of brains, the agents, and then make sure that they're crunched all in the right, reliable way, and insights drawn from that. That seems like the ultimate vision for enterprise data.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Of course, yes, why not? Well, why just look at a customer service dashboard and a sales dashboard? Why have all these silos? We needed those because it was too hard to manage all the data from all these different places, and so we created separate functions and separate data stores. So you've painted a beautiful, big, broad vision, Ashwin, but I'm going to take you right now at the very ground floor of this, because you did announce Agentic Data Management last year. And I was there in the audience to the oohs and ahs of customers and prospects. Question I have for you, it's been over a year since you announced it to the world. And from what I recall, a number of mundane tasks that data engineers would have had to do on their own, ADM has automated. So there is this trade-off that people talk about as far as agency and control, where agency is, you let the agent do more things autonomously versus control where humans take control. Question I have for you, large enterprises, to what extent are they comfortable with agents being given a lot more autonomy, especially for tasks in data engineering, the brass tacks, the low-level tasks today?
Yeah, I think there is, we've seen adoption, but I would say at the top end of the enterprise, a cautious approach, where they want to make sure that, hey, your data does not cross boundaries, that your data is secure, because the probabilistic nature of all this is that you can't for sure guarantee that some pattern that you don't want might happen. You can do it if it's like completely deterministic, saying that you will never ever see a customer email in my database because it never comes in. But now you're saying, hey, give access to all your data tasks. Can I guarantee it? No, but I can be pretty sure. But 99% is not good enough for things which are controlled industries and regulations and things like that. On the business process enterprise, where most of what the value lies, at least for us, adoption is cautious. So people are willing to try, but they really want guarantees. And now we've seen in customers that they, just like they have a security committee, like a group of people who validate a vendor, architecture, software, everything, now they are setting up AI companies as well. They have like a questionnaire of 400, 500 questions which comes in. How does
Sounds
it
like a
work?
small list.
Yeah, it is. And security lists, you know this, right? Security lists are huge, right?
Yeah.
They want every single thing. Do you do replication? What happens if your region goes down stored? How do you guarantee this? Is it data in transit? So that's like 10 things right there. And so same with AI. We have seen now questionnaires come from customers, which are quite comprehensive in the list of things that they want you to, in some sense, sign up to, so that if something goes wrong, they can hold you accountable. And that is hard with AI systems because of the very nature of that beast.
This is a nightmare for small teams.
Yeah.
My last team was about 15 people. It was a bad day when you get that 50-page questionnaire, and then the questions are like, what is the access boundary on your GCP North America cluster? And I'm like, I don't know. How do we commit to it that we don't get?
And that's why I bring it back to, my comment structure. It really helps. You can be successful in spite of it, but, I've always thought that, the best path is like something measurably not so extreme. And so structure, for example, one of the most basic things is that if you have some architectural decision saying, okay, where is the software deployed? Where is the data? What encryption do you use? And how does it work with KMS or something like that? It helps to kind of write it down. And we have a confluence where we write things down. And so those things I feel are important in this industry.
I have only a couple more questions to bring this back home to the folks that are listening to this and they're like, I want to be in shoes in 5 to 10 years. And I think it's a pretty contrite question that gets asked a lot. So I want to attack it in a couple of ways. One is, what are some things that you do that you've always done, maybe, that you find affect how your team shows up as a leader? Like, what do you hold yourself to? Do you see that reflected in your team?
I wouldn't say it's a special formula. One of the policies that we have in this company is, and I've been in other companies as well, where people get too animated and excited and there's like cuss words being thrown around. Might work for a small group of initial people, but as you grow, I think you have to bring some discipline in the way you interact. And so we have something we unofficially call like no jerks policy, where it's not acceptable to sit in a room and shout about the customer incident and this. And so that's something which we have avoided, and I think that has trickled down in our organization, is led with example by Rohit. I mean, anybody who's met him will always say that he's very professional and very calm. The other thing which I personally think is important is that when I started my career and programming, building software, always disliked micromanagement. Because in the end, this sort of knowledge work is also some expression of intellectual curiosity and some freedom to do things. And so if you have a boss, whether it's an architect or a CTO, who wants to basically dictate every single aspect because they feel that they know how to make it work, it's probably not going to work out for a team, technical team, because they would like that freedom. Do you have the like the Google's 20% time.
Right.
That's like long back they had this vision saying people need to be able to express themselves outside the kind of, the tickets they're given to
Right.
execute. So that's something which I've really tried to, inculcate in my team. There is no real micromanagement from my side, and the people who work with me also try to not micromanage. But that doesn't mean that we don't have accountability. I think we collect a lot of data, metrics, create some structure around things so that we know exactly what's going on, right? In a team, where are the problems in delivery, who's fast, who's slow, who's doing well, who's having some challenges. So we know all that, but the answer to that is maybe anything outside micromanagement in all its forms, something which we've really tried to avoid. And it's worked out for me because I feel that the people who work with me, you met Neeraj outside, they tend to stay. People who join us and who at least stayed a year, they end up staying for a long period. And people who don't like this style came in from a company where it was just super focused in a certain way, and you had like, okay, 9 to 5 only and whatever, then a startup is anyway not for them. The people who want to leave usually leave in a year. The people who stayed a year usually stay now 5, 6 years. We just had our company kickoff and we had like 10 people who finished 6 years.
Wow.
Right? And this is outside the core set of people.
Maybe a good question to conclude on. So if we were to just take one of those people that's earlier in their journey, maybe like mid-level, senior, younger engineer at Acceldata right now. Maybe they work at Meta, maybe they recently have been vibe coding on some projects, and they're thinking through their career path. They might try to specialize in something and try to get one of those $2 million a year offers from some research lab. They might try to mold themselves into more of a people leader and become more like yourself and go towards technical management. Maybe they just like go into vibe coding and building prototypes. How would you imagine they're sitting in your office and they're at this career juncture? What questions would you ask them to interrogate how they should develop themselves and how they should develop their career?
It's difficult to sustain anything for a long time if your heart is not in it. Right. So if it's even vibe coding, and earlier if you thought of it, you had an idea, then there's always be like, how do I get it and develop it and deploy it? It's the slowest part of the cycle. Now that's also short-circuited. So then you're basically a person who's creating, your job is to create ideas and try to market it. That's what you're doing. There would be a difference between the best vibe coders and people who just vibe code because they saw a blog online, right? There would be people who can really create unbelievably beautiful, useful, thoughtful software vibe coding. And there'll be people who would create shit software with vibe coding. So like with anything, if you are into that, then probably it's a good time to, new patterns, new models and new techniques. I think, just Claude Code, if you've used it, right, over the last year, using it well has become a skill in itself. There's agents and there's all sorts of sub-agents you can create, and there's context management and memory management. And so if you want to become a really great vibe coder, then you got to put in that work. It's the same to become an AI researcher, right? It's not the fact that it's not known how to train a model. I could probably train a small model following like a blog, but I couldn't do really a frontier model because it's not just like can you learn something, but it's also some art to it. To train a really good model, there is a distance between where I am and where the best researchers are. Right? And so you got to do that work to be that good that you can get this $20 million from. And it's the same for anybody who wants to get a technical manager, right? Lead a bunch of people. You will probably have to start small, lead small teams, and somebody gives you an opportunity, and then someone like Rohit comes along and says that, hey, maybe you can be the CTO because, you look like somebody who can deal with this stuff. So the opportunity has to come along as well, and that's work. Mm-hmm. So in the end, no matter what field you pick up, whether it is vibe coding made software easier, but then there's a lot of work to get good at, right? And that's true for any field. I mean, how do you get good at it? You have to keep doing it. And so my advice is to anybody who comes in and says, okay, what should I do? I have these 3 options. Like, pick the one you like. But it's hard work to get at, really get good at.
It's very beautifully said. It just reminded me of someone who recently said, pain is the new moat. So
somebody has to have some pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
And I feel that new tricks and techniques will come in, especially with vibe coding. as things get more powerful, and somebody who's just doing it like small and somebody who's like really putting effort into it, there'll be like a huge difference. So when you go and whatever is the new form of the technical interview that will happen 2 years from now, there'll be clear difference between people who know how to use these tools well to create good quality, well-tested, deliverable, value-delivering, thoughtful software versus people who will just, garble something up because, the AI can just build anything. There's a difference in levels there as well.
I don't think I've heard anyone actually articulate that way. I'm really glad I asked this question. I learned a lot.
Yes, me
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Pleasure to be here. It's so nice to do it in person.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.